And I just want to say hello to everybody. And like you said, my name is Xavier Garza. I was born in a small border town called Rio Grande City. And one of the things that I always like to do, whether I'm visiting schools or colleges or just talking to people in general, is to always share this message with them before we go into anything. That is that anybody can write a book. Every single person out there listening to this, you can write a book. And the reason that you can write a book is because we all have stories. We all have cuentos. We all have things that have either happened to you or to someone that you know, or you have that aunt, uncle, mother, father, grandfather. They keep telling you all these stories. And all these cuentos, all these stories that you hear, they become the foundation for your cuento, for your story, for your book. And for kids, kids say, look, some kids say, well, if I wanted to write a book one day, but I'm still little, I'm still young, I'm still in kinder, I'm still in first, second, hold on. Okay, it's first or second, and that I tell them, there's three things you should do. If you want to write a book one day, there's three things you do to get yourself ready. The first thing you have to do is number one, you have to write every day, because writing a story, it's kind of like riding a bike. First time you're on it, you're a little wobbly, you might lose your balance, you might fall off a few times, and that's normal. That's gonna happen. But eventually, the more you practice, the more you write, you end up like the kid that after having needed to use training wheels for a little while, next thing you know, they're popping wheelies, showing off in front of their friends, riding the bike without using their hands, even though that's the first thing their parents tell them they're not supposed to do. Writing is the same way. The more you do it, the better you get. And I tell kids, don't believe me, take something that you write today, then take something that you write the next year, and take something that you write every year, from elementary to middle school to high school to college, and you're going to notice that you get better. So write every day. The other thing that I tell students, and this is not just for kids, this is for adults, for everybody, is to read. Read as many stories as you can. Read as many books as you can, big books, little books, comic books, magazines, newspapers, just read. Expose yourself to as many different genres as you can. Because what's going to happen is you might say, well, I like scary stories. I like funny stories. I like reading a good book, but you're not just reading. You're actually learning how to write. You're learning how to make a story be funny, how to make it be informative, how to make it be scary, how to make it be spooky, how to make it be mysterious. There's all these different things that will pop up. And so that's why I tell you, read as much as you can, because when you're reading, you're learning how to write. You're learning how to tell a story, how to make it be all these things that you want your story to be. And when you sit down to write, and this happens to everybody, when you sit down to write, at first, you're going to try to write like somebody else. That's the way everybody starts. You like scary stories, you're going to try to write scary stories in the style of somebody whose work you like. But what's going to happen, and you're not going to notice it till after it's already happened somewhere along the way, you stop writing like that other person, and you start writing like you. You start to tell the story in your style, in your voice. You have become the storyteller. You have become the writer. And that is when you begin to tell your story. So you write a lot, read a lot. And this last one is just as important as the first two, guys. If you have an idea for a story that you think is really, really great, you write that story down. A lot of really great stories are lost each and every day because people don't write them down. They say, oh, that's a really great idea, but you know what? I'll remember. You don't. You forget. Or you might remember it, but you don't remember the exact idea that you had at that very moment in time. So write it down. Write it down. Write your ideas every day, even the silly ones, guys. Sometimes it is the silly idea, the idea that at times seems ridiculous, that goes on to become a great idea. I mean, somebody once had an idea about making a cartoon about a sponge that hangs around with a starfish. I mean, the starfish and the sponge don't move. They don't do much. But look, silly idea, becomes a cartoon like SpongeBob SquarePants. That's why I tell you, any idea you have, you don't have to write the whole thing down right away. Just capture that moment. You know what? I would like to write a book about a little boy or girl that pretend to make a rocket ship out of cardboard and they fly to the moon and back. And you go, okay, story about a boy, girl, make a rocket ship out of cardboard, fly to the moon and back, period. And you have that idea. And once you have that idea, you can always go back to it. You can work on it. You can make it better. You can add it to it. You can grow it. And, and that is whatever ideas come from. And remember, just because somebody tells you that your idea is no good does not mean that they are right. A lot of really great ideas started off with people not thinking they were good ideas. I'll give you one really good example, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about my writing, how I go about creating my ideas. A long time ago, before you were born, before your parents were born, and if your grandparents were around, they were probably little kids running around in diapers. Two kids came up with what they thought was a really great idea. One of the kids wanted to be a writer. The other wanted to be an illustrator, the one that makes the drawings for the stories. And they worked on this idea and they grew up, and one did become a writer. The other one did become an illustrator, and they kept working on their idea, this idea that they had that they thought was going to be so great. Everybody was going to love it. And then after working on their idea for 5 years, they went to try to get their idea published. And nobody liked it. They were told that their idea was silly, that their idea was dumb, that nobody was going to want to read their idea. And you might, well, that's terrible. It had to have been hard for them. Of course it was hard. But they didn't give up. They kept trying, they kept working on their idea, and they kept making it better and better and better. So finally, one day, their idea was published. Now, this was their idea, guys. This is the idea they had that a lot of people thought no kid was ever going to want to read about. They had an idea about a planet, a story about a planet far away from ours, where scientists discovered that the world they were living on was going to explode. But nobody believed them. So he built a rocket ship that was just large enough to carry his son, who was a baby. And he sent his son, this baby, to the planet called Earth, where he was found by an elderly couple that raised the little baby as if he was their own son. Now, as he grew older, they discovered that he could do things that no other kid could do. He was faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. He could leap over tall buildings in a single bound, and people laughed at them when they said that their character was going to wear blue tights. And they thought, kids don't want to read stories about guys that run around in tights. And they said, no, he's not just going to wear blue tights. No, he's going to wear red underwear on top of the tights. And they thought that was ridiculous. They said, wait, hold on. We're not done yet. He's going to have a shiny red cape. We're going to put the letter S on his chest, and we're going to call him Superman. And what they were doing by creating this character that they called Superman, they were creating the world's first superhero. They were creating something that was new, something that was different, something that had not existed before. The concept of the superhero was not around yet. They were the ones coming up with the idea of a costume superhero with capes and tights. And it was new. And when something is new, when something is different, sometimes people are a little afraid of it. They're worried about people not liking it. But people did like it. And what they did by creating the world's first superhero, their idea, which is what you want a story to do, a character to do, their idea inspired other people to create their own stories, to create their own characters that ran around in tights with underwear on top of their tights, wearing capes. And some had special powers. They were super fast. They had power rings that gave them, the ability to create whatever was in their mind. Some had no powers, but they wore capes and costumes, had abilities to fight crime. And what they did is they inspired a whole other group of people to create characters like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Spider-Man, Captain America, the Hulk. And I tell kids, if they had given up, we wouldn't have any of those characters today. So that's why if you have an idea that you think is good, an idea that you believe in, well, you work on that story and you make it better and better. And it doesn't mean that it's going to happen right away. Some books take a long time to finish and get published. Other books happen a lot faster. They're all different. All books are different and they all kind of go their own way. So read a lot, write a lot, and save all your ideas. And expose yourself to as many different genres of writing. Now, I'm going to if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat and I'll address them as we go. Let me share with you all, share the screen momentarily. So, maximize it. All right. This is a collection of the different books that I've written. I love to write about cucuys. I love to write about lucha libre. I love writing about cultural traditions like Dia de los Muertos. My first book was called Creepy Creatures and Other Cucuys. That was followed by Juan and the Chupacabras, Lucha Libre, The Man in the Silver Mask, Zulema and the Witch Owl, Charro Close and the Texas Kid, Kid Cyclone Fights the Devil, Maximilian and the Mystery of the Guardian Angel, Maximilian and the Bingo Rematch, The Donkey Lady Fights La Llorona, The Great and Mighty Nico, Rooster Joe and the Pulley, Maximilian the Lucha Libre Club, Just One Itsy Bitsy Little Bite, Vincent Ventura and the Mystery of the Chupacabra, Vincent Ventura and the Mystery of the Witch Owl, Maximilian the Curse of the Fallen Angel, Vincent Ventura and the Diabolical Duendes, La Llorona Can't Scare Me, Vincent Ventura and the Curse of the Weeping Woman, and coming up next will be my 20th book, which was Vincent Ventura and the Mystery of the Dancing Devil, which is a play on the devil at the dance. So now, when it comes to writing, I'm going to focus on picture books right now. All right, guys, I'm going to focus on picture books. Now, first, anytime that when you're thinking of submitting a manuscript to a publisher, your story, you want to try and get your story published, you have to create a manuscript. Now, to create your manuscript, I'm going to tell you first, write your story. If you're doing a picture book, just concentrate on writing your story. The story always comes first. You might have ideas in your head for illustrations. You might think, oh, it would look so great to do this illustration or that illustration, and it would be such an awesome idea. And it is, and it probably is an awesome idea, but we're going to be honest, the story has to come first. That's what you have to sell the publisher on, your story. So first and foremost, just write your story. This book is not out yet, but I wanted to go ahead and share it with you guys. It's called Little Luchadores and Little Luchadoras. And it's a picture book, early reader. This is the whole story right here in one page. Like I said, it's an early reader book. So the text is, there's not a lot of text. It's just, the books that kids pick up when they're starting to learn to read. Now, but whatever book you're working on, just write your story. Don't worry about anything else. Once you finish your story, you go back, take care of grammar, punctuations, all that stuff. And your editor, if you have one, will help you take care of all that too. But the important thing is to put your story down on paper, which you see here. Now, once your story is done, guys, once you have your story, this is the way I work. Once your story is finished, if you're doing a picture book, like something like this, remember, most picture books, there's a few exceptions, but for the most part, most picture books are 32 pages long. And those picture books consist of 14 pages with the text, 14 pages with illustrations. There's some exceptions, but for the most part, 14 text, 14 illustrations, and the remaining pages are filler. By that I mean the cover, the the title and the author's name, author information, the ISBN number, all that stuff. So you're going to take your story, which you see here, this story. You're going to take it, and then you're going to divide everything that's written here. You will divide it into 14 sections. By 14 sections, I mean this. That's the story that you all just saw. Divided up to, this is 9, and I'll show you, and the other one is here, 14. You have to tell your whole story in these 14 sections. Like page 1, my name is Vicente, and I'm a little luchador. My name is Allison, and I'm a little luchadora. Page 2, and these are all of our lucha libre friends. I call myself the mighty jaguar. Growl, growl, growl. I become the mighty eagle when I put on my lucha libre mask. Scree, scree, scree. Page 5, our friend Martin wears a lucha libre mask that makes him look like a giant bat. Screech, screech, screech. So like I said, pretty much, just minimize it a little bit here. And that's kind of like what I'm doing here at this point. You take your story and you break it down into 14 sections. And if you're doing a picture book, this is the way you're going to send it in. You're not going to send in your manuscript like this for a picture book. You send it already broken. This is the way I do it. Other people might do it differently. Everybody has their own formula, their own style of doing things. But for me, this is the way that I do it. Now, as I showed you all here, I showed you all how it's all, let me go ahead and make it large again. And there's the other page. Now, let me stop the share just for a second. See if there's no questions, no questions. No, okay, all right. And if you have questions, I know you can just put them on the Q&A, and you can also, at the end, we'll also have more questions. Now, let me go ahead and go back to sharing the screen. Now, here, I'm going to share with you guys this. I'm going to show you where I start to put the illustrations together with the story. Now, let me explain one thing real quick about illustrations. If you are the author and you are the illustrator, and the publisher you're working with is letting you do this, that's great. Now, if you are the author but not the illustrator, a couple of things is the publisher will usually find an illustrator. You might have an idea of a person in mind, but you gotta keep in mind that you can mention that to the publisher, but in the end, they're the ones that have the final say on who is going to do the illustrations. Now, a lot of times, guys, unless you already know them from somewhere, you've been on panels together, the author and the illustrator often do not meet. There's a reason for that, though, because the author has a vision in his or her head of what the characters are supposed to look like. The illustrator, after reading the story, has a vision in his or her head of what the characters are supposed to look like. And a lot of times they are not exactly the same. So they kind of keep them separate to be able to, that the work gets produced. And so just to let you know, a lot of times you don't meet the illustrator. If you're the author, you might not meet the illustrator till the story is done and you happen to be on a panel with them. And if you're the illustrator, you might not meet the author unless you're on a panel with them somewhere. Now, this is like a little intro that I have there. But do you know what little luchadoras and little luchadores dream about when they sleep? They dream of one day becoming big luchadores and big luchadoras. And here's the first sketch. Now, keep in mind, when it comes to children's books, I'm a big believer, and this is just me, that children, and I say children because it's a picture book, children should be able to see themselves in the characters that they are reading about. Growing up, I mean, there weren't a lot of Latino characters and stories. Today, there's more books that have Latino characters, but we always need more characters that kids can identify with. And in this case, I have, it looks like a kid wearing a luchador mask. And that's the way I want it to be, because this is the way that the kid should see himself. And I try to think back to a child putting on a lucha libre mask, and there, the first thing you do is you pretend to be this great big mighty luchador. And he says, I am Vicente, and I am a little luchador. And there you have him dressed in his little lucha libre costume. And then you have here, and these are all of my lucha libre friends. And there he is surrounded by other luchadores. There are also kids. You can tell, you look at them, it's obvious that they are children. The illustrations have to go with what you're saying. Like, I become a mighty jaguar when I put on my lucha libre mask. Growl, growl, growl. Now, in this case, like I said, the text is limited because it's for early readers. They're barely starting to read. And in early picture books, the illustrations help to tell the story. They help to, the imagery plays a big role in getting the story told. And there you have, he's there wearing his little, jaguar outfit. And then you bring in the other, this other here. My cousin Allison becomes a mighty eagle when she puts on her lucha libre mask and scree, scree, scree. She's there with her hands up in the air, wearing a mask, has an eagle on it. She's got like a cape that looks like eagle wings, and she's standing in the middle of the ring, looking tough, looking strong, but still looking like a child, like a kid. And that's what you want. You want kids to look at these pictures, look at this story, and maybe picture themselves as a mighty luchador. My cousin Tomas wears a lucha libre mask that makes him look like a scary monster. Boo, boo, boo. And you have their, cousin Tomas, Primo Tomas, standing there wearing his scary mask and his little wrestling outfit, and then that's followed by the next little luchador that shows up. My friend Carlitos wears a mask that makes him look like a giant bat. Screech, 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 and he's standing there in the ring wearing like a bat, holding his cape with the bat with like wings, the little mask, the little boots, and still, they're little kids. My sister's best friend, Lily, wears a lucha libre mask that is covered with pictures of lots and lots of fish. Glub, glub, glub. You have the little luchadora there, wearing her own outfit. And then she's followed in turn by my friend Corel likes to roar like a ferocious dragon when he wears his lucha libre mask. Roar, roar, roar. And he stands there, like a mighty dragon roaring up into the heavens. And then you're going to see a lot of pencil sketches because it's at the stage that I'm at in most of the book. About 70% of the book is pencil sketches, the idea right now. All these little luchadores and little luchadores love to wrestle. And you have the kids, they're play fighting, which a lot of kids do. They're play wrestling. And she has her knee in the back of the other little luchador. And the idea being that I want to put action. I told Pete, when it comes to illustrating, exaggerate everything. Exaggerate the moves, the gestures. Little luchadores and luchadoras train all day to do drop kicks and backflips. And you have this little luchador, he's got the other little luchador, and he's like, flipping him over. And then we have little luchadores, and little luchadores will leap up into the air. The higher, the better. And you have them there leaping off the top turnbuckles, flying halfway across the ring. The type of things that kids would when they pretend to be like any character, whether it's a superhero, a luchador, they'll pretend to be a certain character and do the things that this character does. And then here, every little luchadores and little luchadores love to flex their mighty muscles. And when you're a kid, they go around pretending to be like flexing their muscles, like they're big and they're strong, even though they're still little. And you have them there all posing, like showing how they've got muscles, even if they don't. And all the luchadores and little luchadoras want to push themselves to be the best that they can be. And of course, why do they want to be the best? Because they all want to grow up to become the champion of lucha libre. And of course, only the very best can be the champion of lucha libre. You have all the little kids there gathered around the championship belt, which they all eventually want to win. They want to be the champion. They want to be the next. So let me stop the share here. So that's that's kind of like the way when it comes to the way I write, when it comes to the way I work, that's pretty much what I do. The story comes first, always the story. Let me see, there's a question here. Does attention to detail matter to the young readers, and would this affect the way they identify the character and connect with them? Does this make a good book, or is it just a minor detail in that story that doesn't exactly matter? Okay, when it comes to detail, it kind of depends on what you're trying to do with the story itself. Like one thing about readers, when they're reading a book, and if you're writing about a certain subject matter, if you are going to touch, like with me, if I'm writing a book about lucha libre, and I want it to be authentic, I want it to be genuine, you got to do the research. Because you want to make sure that you get the research right, because kids will notice, readers will notice. I say kids, but readers will notice, especially if it's somebody that knows the subject matter. One author that I would highly recommend for you to read is Guadalupe McCall. She has written, several books, Summer of the Mariposas, and she is into research. Yes, it's fiction, it's young adult fiction, but she goes, if she's writing about a specific era, a specific time period, she will go and do research and on that time period, because she wants her story. Yes, she wants to tell a really good story. She wants it to be genuine. She wants it to, not for somebody to say, well, that's not the way things really were at that time. No. Even if you're writing fiction, you want your time period, the area when you're setting this to be taking place. You want it to be genuine, authentic. And I think that is something that every author should do. Write your story, go back, look at the history, make sure, especially if you're kind of using history in it. A lot of it also honestly has to do with the subject matter of that you're touching on. A children's picture book, depending on the subject matter, might not require as much research, but it's still always good to cover your bases to make sure that that if you're paying homage or trying to bring attention to a certain issue or a certain concept or idea, that you're approaching it genuine. I'll give you I wrote a book called Rooster Joe and the Bully, which basically deals about a kid, dealing with a big guy who was a bully. And then it ends up learning that while he himself was not big enough to really beat this guy, when a bunch of people united together, they were able to make the big bully back down and stop picking on them. Now, that story is actually based on something that kind of happened. A friend of mine, San Antonio artist Joe Lopez, many years ago, he had a legal battle with Gallo Wines because he did a whole series of rooster paintings, and he called them his Puro Gallo series, pure rooster. And he actually got sued because they said, you're using the word gallo. And he said, I'm not using gallo, I'm using gallo. That's Spanish for a rooster. And it was a 5-year court battle, which he was represented by pro bono by former Congressman Filemon Vela Jr. And the argument was that you can't own a word that means rooster in another language. And it might be spelled the same as your company's name, but he said it has a totally different meaning. And after a 5-year court battle, they actually, got the company to back down and actually say they couldn't own the word. So it's kind of like the idea of he himself couldn't do much, but all these people united around him, and together they were able to make a stand and actually preserve their language, which was the use of the word rooster, which is Spanish. So that's one thing about just do the research, know the history, know what's going on to the story, if you, especially if you're doing like older material. Any other questions before we move on to anything else? Or hopefully I answered the question that was asked. Let me see. Okay, good. All right, now let's see here. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen. I'm going to show you another book of mine that's a work in progress. I mean, this book's already out. I will share some books with you guys in a bit that are not out yet. Give you all a preview of them. But this is one I'm sure some of you have already seen. Zulema and the Witch Owl. And this is just to show you how, when it comes to the illustration part, the story, the images, the characters develop. If you're working on them, you have an idea in your head of what the characters are supposed to look like, but that does not mean that that is the way that they're gonna stay. Sometimes characters take on a life of their own, and I tell students, when you're writing a story, I tell them you work with an editor. And I compare it to like when you're in school and you give your paper to the teacher and she gives it back to you full of marks. She or he is not doing it to be mean. They're doing it because they want to help you get better, to make your writing better. So that's what the editor is doing. And editors are wonderful because what happens is you get so wrapped up in the story that you forget things, and your editor will tell you. You know, in my case, one of my favorite editors to work with was Lee Bird, from what was Cinco Punto Press, which is now part of Lianlo. She would tell me, you know, I like what you did, and you brought this really great subject up in chapter 3. Then you never touched on that subject again throughout the book. Is there a reason? And what happens? There was no reason. I hadn't touched on it. I just forgot. So they catch all these little mistakes that you go back and fix. And I can honestly say, working with people like Lee Bird made me a much better writer than I was when I first started. Now, the other thing I also tell students is this: you also work with an art editor. If you want to be an illustrator, they don't just tell you, here, draw. No, that's not how it works. They don't just tell you draw. They give you an editor, and his or her job is to make your drawings better. And you know, and it can be frustrating at times, but you know what? In the end, you are a better illustrator by having worked with these art editors. Like, they'll tell you, okay, I want you to make this. I like the drawing that you did. I like this picture, the scene that you did. It looks really great. But could you do the same scene, but do it from a different angle? Like maybe do it from the top looking down, so it's more dramatic. And you're like, you want me to redraw that same picture from a different angle? And at first you're like, it's kind of frustrating. But then you know what? You do it and you go like, you know what? They were right. It does look much better. And this is sketches from the book Zulema and the Witch Owl, which is a story. If you're not familiar with that story, it's a little girl named Zulema. She is the She is the meanest little girl in the whole wide world. She is so mean. She was kicked out of the Girl Scouts for throwing rocks at anybody that didn't want to buy her cookies. She is so mean that cute little puppies and small little kittens, they run and hide whenever they see her coming, because they know that if she grabs them, she's gonna yank them by their tails, hoist them up in the air, and spin them round and round and round till the poor things look like airplane propellers. And Zulema is so mean that when they're spinning their fastest, that's when she'll let go. So this was me. This is the first page in the book. This is me introducing the readers to the character of Zulema. And like I said, she's a bit of a bully. She's not a bad kid, but she's a bit of a troublemaker. And nothing seems to get her to behave. And you see her there. This is the early sketches of what the idea coming up with the character. And there she is. She's a terror. She's swinging her slingshot. The cat and the dog are hiding from her, and she's waving her fist in the air. And and I thought, I put her like a little overall dress, and even though she's all tough, I gave her a shirt with a little flower on it. And one of the things, if you're illustrating picture books, one of the things that I tell students is exaggerate everything. I call it the comic book rule. Exaggerate everything. A superhero just doesn't throw a punch. a superhero twists their entire body and unleashes an uppercut that sends the villain flying, his feet leaving the ground as he is, propelled into defying gravity by the sheer brute impact of the blow. So exaggerate everything. Use me personally, I love to use rich yellow, orangey, blue, red colors, yellows that will, I call them piñata colors, colors that will kind of draw the eyes of the viewer. Now, this was one of the first. This would actually be I believe it's the third picture book I illustrate. So I'm still learning. It's still a learning stage for me at this point, which is why I look at this to the first sketch and the final sketch. They look different, and when I showed them this sketch. This is what and this is the thing of the beauty about art editors. They catch your mistakes that you don't catch at the time. And they tell me, okay, I like this picture here. That is so cool. It's one of those old, and I have a series of photographs of my relatives when they're in those old round oval photographs. And so that's what I wanted. I like that old oval photograph with the picture of the grandma, which later on comes into the story, and the mom. Tulema, he said, how old is she supposed to be? She looks kind of little. And when I looked at it, like, oh shoot, she is too little. And then they said, okay, the concept is good, but if you make the characters fill up more of the page, and maybe put the grandma's picture on the wall, it'll look more dramatic. And it did. You have here, it's like almost like a pyramid. 1, 2, 3. You have the mom, you have Sulema, you have the grandma's picture. And at this point in the story, it says that nothing gets Sulema to behave. Nothing gets her to behave the way she is supposed to. So then her mother tells her that Grandma Sabina, who is the oldest living member of the Ortiz family, she is over 85 years old. There's nobody older than her, is going to come live with them. And she tells her, you better be respectful, you better be nice, because she's, the oldest living member of the Ortiz family. And, her mom is worried that Sulema is going to be mean to her because that's the way Sulema is. And of course, the day comes when Grandma Sabina finally arrives. Now, same deal here with the sketches. They told me, zoom in on the picture, to make it more, it's more of a dramatic effect. Here, they say, I like the pose, I like her defiant look, and I like the owl, kind of like being, like an like a bubble that pops up to show everybody what it looks like. But by simply making these two pictures, zooming in on them, making them bigger so they fill up more of the page, and then just leaving this in the upper corner there, it makes for a more dramatic look. And you also, in this part of the story, the grandma shows up, Sulema's mean to her, ask her why is her skin all wrinkled like an elephant's trunk. No reason for her to be mean. It's like a defense mechanism for her. She has to be mean to everybody before they're mean to her. But then the grandma tells her, Sulema, you better stop being so mean to everybody, because if you don't, the witch owl, La Lechuza, is going to come looking for you. And that La Lechuza is being, Sulema knew the stories of women that through magic would turn themselves into giant white owls, and they would go around going to the biggest cities or the smallest towns, looking for boys or girls that were disrespectful, that didn't listen to their parents, stealing them away, never, ever, ever to be seen again. But, the idea being, it's basically Spanish culture, pórtate bien, or ahí viene el cucuy. Behave, or the cucuy is going to come get you. And you also learn, put little secrets. Later on in the story, you'll learn, something about the grandmother. But if you look at her eyes look a little peculiar. Look at that shawl she's wearing, it almost looks like wings. The cane she uses to walk looks like the cane of with an owl's head. And just little things that later on in the story make sense. Now, here's another example of, the learning process. when you're working with an editor. I'm glad to say that now I still work with editors. You always work with an art editor when you're an illustrator, but the changes, corrections are a lot less because a lot of the mistakes that I made, I learned from them. Here is, you have her looking out the window, because then what happens is Sulema goes to sleep. And when she goes to sleep, here's someone tapping outside her bedroom window. She goes outside, she gets out of bed, pulls the curtains open, there's nobody there. So she's looking, and you see her there. Same deal, took the sketch, this idea. This is just a quick sketch, an idea what to work with. And then I went ahead and just zoomed in on the window, made her figure dominate the page more. And and you see there a feather floating down for some reason as she looks out and sees nothing outside her bedroom window. A couple of changes that I did do when I was doing this, the editor told me, what's she wearing? Like a nightgown? Yeah, I think, yeah, she's wearing like a little batita. And she goes, how often do kids wear those when they sleep? And I think, you know what, you're right. They wear pajamas. So I kind of put her in a little pajama. Well, basically it's the shirt she was wearing, and then just put some pajama bottoms on. And I just think it's kind of like the book itself. I wanted to have a bit of a eerie, kind of spooky. Not, I tell people I wanted the story to be spooky, but not traumatizing to a child. So she's there looking up, and the big eyes. Somebody asked me, why the big eyes? And I said, I love anime. I love the style of animation for anime. I love it, and that's one of my like me paying tribute to the whole anime concept with the big eyes, which of course they exaggerate the size of the eyes. But it's a great way to express feelings, kind of like what's going on in their head. And then eventually somebody taps at her window again. So Sulema goes, she pulls the curtains open. Once again, there's nobody there. So she's mad because she realizes somebody's trying to play a trick on her. This is the original sketch, and this is eventually what ended up being the final picture. She's there waving her fist, mad. Whoever's out there, I'm gonna get you. And then you continue here. Eventually, somebody taps her window a third time. She runs over. She pulls the curtain open, and standing outside her window is the lechuza, the witch owl, which has come to teach her a lesson, to steal her away, to teach her manners, as the grandma says in the story. And here's the final drawing. You have the witch owl, kind of like its chest puffed out. And she's yelling and screaming for somebody to come save her. Now, in the story, it says, but no one comes to help. It's as if no one could hear her crying for help. The witch owl rears its head back and smashes it against the window, and the window shatters. And the witch owl flies into the room. This is one where, I talked to you all about, sometimes the editor will tell you to do it from a different angle for dramatic effect. And that is actually what we did here. You look here, the owls, and some of the mistakes, I look back at him and I go like, what was I thinking? Because he said the owl's supposed to be, because in the story it says the owl, witch owl flies into the room and lands on top of her bed. It is so tall, over 7 feet tall, with glowing eyes that burn like they're on fire. Its head almost touches the ceiling as it's on top of her bed. And then I look at it and she's like, that's no 7-foot owl. And I go like, no, it's not. So kind of like, this is the idea of just changing the angle to make it more dramatic. So the witch owl dominates the page. You see part of Sulema, you see it flying towards her as it smashed through the window. It just makes for a more dramatic, more impactful story, impactful image, I think. And this is like me literally making mistakes, learning as I go. And if you end up illustrating books, it is a learning process. And as you go through it, you will be learning, making mistakes and making corrections, and kind of, learning as you go, if you will. And eventually what ends up happening is that the witch owl, tells Sulema that it's going to steal her away. And Sulema says no and tries to run away, but the witch owl grabs her, lifts her off the ground till her tiny feet can no longer touch the floor. But just as the witch owl is about to steal her away, she promises to be good. She promises to behave. And the witch owl gives her a chance and says, how good. She promises she will never, ever throw rocks at people that don't want to buy her Girl Scout cookies. She promises never to grab a kitty or a puppy by its tail and swing them round and round and round till the poor things look like airplane propellers. She promises that she'll be nice to her grandmother. She's going to be so nice. She will become the favorite grandchild. She will listen to anything and everything that her mother tells her to do. And the witch owl says, this is good, but you better keep your promise or I'll come back for you. The witch owl tells her to close her eyes, and she closes them. The witch owl warns, no peeking. Here's another same deal mistake where the witch owl was just a little too small. I had to make it larger. And the witch owl tells her to close her eyes. She closes them. And then after a while, she doesn't hear any sound and she wants to peek, but she's worried that what if the witch owl is still there? What if it gets mad? And then she finally hears a voice that says, Sulema, why are you standing barefoot on the floor? And Sulema opens her eyes, and what does she see? It's her grandma Sabina, standing right there in front of her. And she goes, Grandma, the witch owl was here. The witch owl asks Grandma Sabina, Mija, that's just a story. It's not real. But it's real, Grandma. She says, it broke right through my window. And Grandma Sabina says, Mija, but look, your window's not even broken. Sulema couldn't believe it. She had to go touch it with her own hands. Not broken. And, so she's, Grandma tells her, get into bed. You need to be asleep, Mija. Your little kids should be asleep by now. So she gets into bed, and her grandmother leans down and kisses her on her forehead. But Sulema's already thinking, well, if it was just a dream, well, then I don't have to keep my promise, because who keeps a promise to a dream, right? That's just silly. But just then, as her grandmother is kissing her on her forehead, something falls out from her grandmother's hair and lands right on top of her as she's laying on her bed. And as the grandma leaves the room, Sulema looks at what fell on top of her, and it's a white feather. And Sulema has to wonder, is Grandma Sabina the witch owl? And if she is, did she leave this feather behind as a reminder to me to keep my promise to be good? And that's Sulema and the witch owl. And then which goes back to that, like I had said earlier, about putting telltale signs about the grandma with a shawl that looks like wings and the walking cane. And so it's just to give you an idea, once you do end up, if you are the writer and you also aspire to be the illustrator for your books, this is a whole learning process that you will go through. And like I said, working with editors, it's a learning process. You will learn a lot, whether you're working with a writing editor or an art editor. You will learn a lot, because I know a lot of people, you say, well, I know how to paint. Yeah, you know how to paint, you know how to draw. But illustrating is something that you also have to learn. And there's some really great illustrators out there. Raul III is the one that I recommend you to look at his work. I love his work. I think his work is amazing. The Space Lowriders and all this really incredible illustrations. He just has this ability to just kind of give each individual drawing that he does. He gives them this whole personality, this whole just a character to them that you even though they're cartoons, you can kind of figure out, this is the way this character would react or that character would react, because they truly do have their own personality. Let me stop the share, see if there's any questions from anybody. Anybody got any questions they want to ask before we continue on to the next things? Preguntas? No. Okay, so one thing that I always tell some people say about, well, what should I write about? Let me go back to the sharing the screen. When it comes to what people write about, I tell people, write about what you know. Write about things that have happened to you. One of the things that I grew up with, and this is back when I was in the Valley, I grew up with the concept of a Mexican Santa Claus. Hold on, let me see here. My two daughters are loving it. They ask if you have any art tips. Yes, art tips. Somebody asked if I have any art tips for kids. Yes, I definitely do. First and foremost, I would encourage any kid, go look at picture books, and go to the library, get as many different picture books as you can, and read the story. And this is a great little lesson for kids to do. You read the story, read the whole book, then get yourself a sketchbook. And what you do is you read that section. You come here and you read the section. Let's say you go to page, that's any page in general. You go ahead and you read that part of the story. After you read it, use your imagination to create an illustration for that drawing, for that particular part of the story. And you go off and you do sketches for every single part of the story. And then just because what you're really learning then is you're taking an author's story and you're putting it in your head, and then you're using that to create your own drawings that show what those characters are supposed to look like in your mind. Because remember, you're taking somebody's words and reinterpret them in the way your mind sees them. And just draw as much as you can, guys, because drawing is just like writing. The more you do it, the stronger you get. Take something you draw today, and then take something you draw next year and the following year, and then look at some of the drawings that you do when you're in high school and college, and you're going to see your drawings just get better and better. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. All right. Now, when it comes to this story, it's one of my personal favorites, Charro Close and the Tejas Kid. This story, originally it was just a story that I wrote for my little boy, who's not little anymore. He's 18, but at the time he was still little. He was a little baby, and he was old enough to understand when I told him stories, what was going on. And my dad had introduced me growing up to the idea or the concept of a Mexican Santa Claus. I was going to, we're at a store called Valley Mart, and they were having a take your picture with Santa Claus day. And I got in line. I was little, it was exciting. And as I'm getting closer to the front of the line, I noticed that Santa Claus looked different. I mean, yes, he was dressed in red and white, like Santa Claus wears the red and white suit. But he was dressed like he was wearing a great big charro hat. He had a zarape with a Mexican eagle on its back. And I said, that doesn't look quite right. And I told my dad, Papi, that's not Santa Claus. And my dad said, no, mijo, that's Pancho. That's his Mexican cousin. And I was like, Santa Claus has a Mexican cousin? I was shocked. And then when I was in second grade, Miss Barrera played a song for us. And the song was called Pancho Claus by Lalo Guerrero. And it was a story about a Mexican Santa Claus. It said, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the casa, not a creature was stirring. Ay, caramba, ¿qué pasa?" And I loved the song. But then when I got older and I started to do a little research on it, one thing that I noticed, it was never explained who this Mexican Santa Claus was, where he came from. There was no origin story. So I wanted to introduce my son to this concept of a Mexican Santa Claus. But I wanted to do something different, something to make sure he would always remember it. So I decided I was going to write a story. It was a quick little short story, maybe about a page long. And I read it to him when he was in bed. But after I read him the story about how this Mexican Santa Claus came to be, when I was done, I was like, this is actually a pretty cool story. And I think it's something that might work as a full picture book. So I went back and I started working on the story some more. I added the character of the Tejas Kid, because going back to what I said earlier, to me, if you're writing a book for kids or young adults, they should be able to see themselves reflected in the characters. And I added the Tejas Kid, which the story of Charro Close and the Tejas Kid is told through the eyes of his nephew Vincent. Vincent is also the name of my son, and the characters kind of change as they go. I tell people, going back, this is early sketches for when I was trying to come up with the characters. They end up looking totally different. The cool thing about it, I tell people, is that when you're illustrating the characters, you can make them look like anybody you want. The boy in the story, I made him look like my son Vincent at the time, the way he looked at that time. And the Uncle Pancho, I went ahead and made him look like me, in the story. And so, just I tell people the book is a great big I love you to my son. And I tell you, when he was little, he would get excited that I would say he was the Tejas kid, or now he's older and a little embarrassing. When he's older and has a family of his own, he'll get to tell them that he's the character in the book. And of course, his kids will probably go like, yeah, right. But it's just something that I want. That book was more like for him. And these are the sketches that eventually led to this cover. This is going back to what I said about working with an art editor. This would be the concept for the cover. But when they looked at it, they told me, okay, I like the concept. We like the idea of the wagon, and he's riding and the kids next to him. But it also, it lacks something. It doesn't have a lot of energy. It needs something. It's just not very exciting. So what we ended up doing was I took the same drawing, I switched the angle a little bit. I thought to myself, picture a roller coaster. The most exciting part of a roller coaster is not when you're going up, it's when you're coming down. So I changed the angle to this. You see the hair kind of flying up in the air, the hair kind of flapping up because they're going straight down. Their eyes are kind of looking downward because they're going straight down the reins. Everything's kind of in the image. It's kind of the cape flapping. It's to indicate that they're about to go down, descend down on the first house. And I showed them this sketch, and they said that was much better. And then that eventually became this, which eventually became the cover for this book, Carlos and the Tejas Kid. So that's why this is one of my personal favorites. Like I said, it was just a book that I kind of did to, it started off as a bedtime story that went off and became the story of Santa's Mexican cousin and how he came to be. And the story goes towards it's a cold Christmas Eve night when a boy named Vincent is getting ready for bed. He's spending Christmas Eve with his Tío Pancho, who lives along the U.S.-Mexico border. And he's tired after having done all his chores, including feeding the chickens and milking the cows. So he is ready for some much-needed sleep. But no sooner has Vincent gone to sleep when he is awakened by the thump, thump, thump sound of someone walking across the top of the roof. Vincent jumps out of bed and runs over to the window to see what is happening. And he sees that his Uncle Pancho is going up a ladder to the top of the roof. Vincent wants to know, ¿Qué está pasando? What's going on? So he puts on his little boots and his little coat, and he too runs down the stairs and begins to climb up the ladder. And when he reaches the top of the ladder, he cannot believe what he is seeing. For standing on top of the roof is his Uncle Pancho, and he's talking to Santa Claus. We recognize it because of his big round panza and fluffy white beard. And he can't believe what they're saying. Santa Claus says, Primo Pancho, I'm in so much trouble. What happened, cousin? What's wrong? I am so far behind. I'm not going to be able to deliver all the presents to all the kids that live around the world. I wish I could help you, says Uncle Pancho. And Santa Claus says, you can. And Vincent cannot believe it. His Uncle Pancho and Santa Claus are cousins. They're primos. They're family. And then the story continues of how Santa Claus, the Mexican Santa Claus, Charro Claus, came to be. Here's some, these are I tell people these are planning sketches. As you're working on your story, you're adding, trying to design the way the characters are going to look. That was one of the designs for Uncle Pancho. Eventually, this ended up being the look for him. Slight variation, a slightly different use of the color. But it was just trying to develop what is the character going to look like? What is he going to wear? This is some sketches for the story as I was trying to develop the look, the little girl in the story, the little boy, and the uncle. In a lot of my books, I'll include little luchadores. Even if the book is not a luchador book, I'll include a little luchador in there somewhere to kind of go with the idea of this, my own personal love of lucha libre. And here's some other designs, other sketches as I'm working on it, trying to still figure out the colors. I wasn't too happy with the costume. At one point, I had him wearing Texas boots with a Texas logo on them and like a red stripe. And then I thought, no, that's a little too much. So you're developing the look, trying to develop what the character is going to look like. Here's some early sketches for the Texas kid, trying to develop his look. At one point, I had him like this, and I said, no, I want to give him a cape. And and you're developing the characters. It's like you're trying to determine what they are going to look like. This here is the early sketches, and this is what we ended up with at the end. And there you have him riding one of the magical burros. They are Charro Claus's magical flying burros that wear lucha libre masks just because. And in the story, Santa Claus sprinkles glitter over the top of each of the burros' heads. Then they begin to, their feet go up into the air till their tiny hoofs can no longer touch the floor. And then they begin to fly all around the room. They are the magical flying burros that are used to pull the magical wagon that will help them deliver presents to all the kids that live on both sides of the US-Mexico border. And neither rain nor wind nor border fences will keep Charro Claus and Texas kid from making sure that every child wakes up with a Christmas present under their tree, regardless of what side of the border they live on. And so that's, I'll talk about this in a bit. That's on that end, like for Charro Claus and the Texas kid. Anybody got any questions they want to ask, preguntas that you want to ask, feel free. It can be about illustrating, writing, anything you all feel like you're curious about. Anybody? So what I'll do, this here I included here. These are the illustrations for the last Maximilian book that I did up to now. I want to say some people are asking, is there going to be a fifth Maximilian book? Yes, I am working on a fifth Maximilian book, and I'm actually working on a spin-off series idea that I have for the Maximilian books. Have you read anything about dragons? What did they already mention? Okay, dragons. I have not yet written about dragons per se. I am working on a story that deals with Quetzalcoatl, which is a form of a dragon. But now, as far as illustrators, the one I mentioned, his name is Raul, R-A-U-L, the third, T-H-E, and then just third, Raul the third. Just type in, you can Google his name like that, Raul the third, and yeah, you'll love his illustrations. His illustrations are like they're graphic novel / comic book / comic strip. They're hard to describe, but they really are very entertaining. They're a lot of fun to watch, and I always enjoy looking at his work. I think you'll like it too. So look into their work. That would be a great starting point to look at their work, at his work. Now, this is what happens with Maximilian is this. I was kind of like with the Maximilian books, they were first put out by Cinco Punto Press. Now, eventually, Cinco Punto Press is a part of Lee and Low. It's an imprint of Lee and Low books now. And Lee and Low, they told me they were gonna pick up and put out Lucha Libre, The Man in the Silver Mask. They're also putting out Charro Clos and the Tejas Kid, The Great and Mighty Nico, and they're also doing all 4 of the Maximilian books. So, and they're available now under they're exactly the same story, same illustrations. Which I was really happy that the covers, everything stayed the same. It just on the back is just an imprint of Lian Lo Books, and also they are going to be doing a series of audiobooks. The books will be available in audiobooks, and I'm also going to be doing a 5th Maximilian book. And then this here are the illustrations. Just to give you an idea, this is for young adult books and picture books. When it comes to the illustration, they're both a lot of work. You're looking probably, I tell people for a picture book, you're probably looking at about 14 color illustrations and about 14 color illustrations that serve as dividers. Kind of like by dividers, this is what I mean. You have a drawing that goes in between English and Spanish, and you have the illustration here. So you end up doing a total of 28 color illustrations. Color illustrations take longer because it's you have to make sure the colors are blended. Now you might say, well, that's 28 illustrations a lot. Yeah, but you usually end up doing like 34, 38, 40 illustrations. Not all of them get used. Not every illustration. It's like when they make a movie. Movies get edited for time, for space. So a lot, like sometimes scenes get cut from movies. Sometimes not all the illustrations that you make are used in the book. Now, this is for a young adult book, which is a chapter book, Maximilian and the Curse of the Fallen Angel. And there's an illustration for every chapter. There's a lot of illustrations. If you really look at it, there's like 6, 12, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 illustrations. They're black and white. With the only thing that's color is the cover. And so you have, they're both a lot of work, but it's fun. I mean, you really truly have a good time coming up with the ideas, the illustrations, and telling the story of the characters. Some of them are, when I'm working on it, I have one of the wrestlers, El Vampiro, dressed in a tuxedo because he's going to a wedding, and so there's just, and of course, the best part of luchadores is that I tell people when it comes to drawing luchadores, the best part of drawing luchadores for the children's books and young adult books is that, they're like superheroes in a way. I tell people they wear the costumes, they wear the capes, they're like superheroes and supervillains come to life, and they tell this really, truly incredible story. And to a child, I mean, they are like comic book villains and heroes, except these are not just drawings. They're like, real people that nobody ever sees without their mask. So it's a lot of fun to try to bring this world of lucha libre, into my books. And here's another. Let me show you a couple of other things. These are some of the rough drafts for lucha libre. By the way, this is a picture of me with the great Mil Máscaras, the man of 1,000 masks, at one of the wrestling matches. And, it was this love of lucha libre and Mexican wrestling that led to me authoring what would be my first lucha libre book, which just basically tells the story of what it's like to go see wrestling through the eyes of a child. And these are some of the sketches, some of the inspiration for the imagery, the man in the silver mask, and some of the sketches for eventually what would become this from the great and mighty Nico, and early sketches for the Lucha Libre book. That, like I said, not everything gets used. This is sketches that ended up not in the book and had to, the book changes as it's going. Have I ever seen El Santo? James is asking. Yes, I have. I've actually, I wish I had it with me. I would love to share I saw El Santo wrestle. Well, not wrestle. He wasn't wrestling anymore. El Santo was already retired, but every so often he would show up at the arenas. People would recognize him. He'd wave at everybody. And you're so focused on seeing him with the mask that, I remember thinking back now, I go like, I didn't notice it because you just focused on the mask, but then you could notice, remembering his hands, he had the spots on him. He was an old man already wearing the mask. I did have El Hijo del Santo. I've met El Hijo del Santo a couple of times, the son of El Santo. And actually recently, back in the summer, he was wrestling here in San Antonio. And I got to take my son, Vincent, because he grew up hearing stories about the man in the silver mask, the books. And so we got to meet the actual Hijo del Santo, the son of the saint, and took a picture with him, which was really cool. And now I'll send you the picture. I think you might have seen it on Facebook, James, where just for a moment, my son is a little starstruck that he's seeing. This is the son of El Santo. That he's taking a picture with, and these are some other sketches that this is I'll go into this in a bit. This is one of my latest picture. This sketch would become a picture book called La Llorona. La Llorona Can't Scare Me. And let's see, anybody have a question they would like to ask before we move on? Anybody preguntas, questions, anybody? No? All right, so let's go ahead and I'm gonna share this story with you all. It's my latest picture book called La Llorona Can't Scare Me. La Llorona No Me Asusta. And after that, I'm gonna give you all a quick peek at some books that I am currently working on that hope that should be coming out down the road. I tell people when it comes to books, take a while. Some people ask me, how long does it take to complete a book? And I say, some books are quick. You can write the story and do the illustrations and have the book ready to go within a year and a half. Some books take a longer time. It took me 5 years to write the first Maximilian books. But all books are different. Now, this story is based on the idea of El Cucuy. La Llorona, los duendes, las lechuzas, all these different scary characters that we grew up with in Latin American culture. And I said, what would happen? How would the Cucuys react if they came across a child that was not scared of them? I mean, because basically that's their whole thing. They like to be feared. And what would happen if they come across a kid that's just not afraid of La Llorona, not afraid of the donkey lady, not afraid of any of them? And a better question is, why is he not afraid of them? ¿Por qué no les tiene miedo? And so, see, it's a simple concept. You take a simple idea, and then you expand on it, and you make into this great big a story. And this is called La Llorona Can't Scare Me. La Llorona No Me Asusta. The scary ghost of La Llorona is hollering up a storm outside my bedroom window, trying to scare me. But I'm not afraid of her. I tell her, you silly Llorona, you can't scare me with your silly eye. Where are my children? Not even a little bit. La Llorona, who is outside his window, well, she doesn't like that Damian is not afraid of her. Because all kids are supposed to be afraid of La Llorona. And La Llorona is not going to allow this to stand. She says, no, this child will fear me. So she calls her friends, because believe it or not, La Llorona has friends. And her friends are her monster friends, and they are called Los Cucuys. Now, the first Cucuys to arrive are two lechuzas, two witch owls flying around the room going hoot, 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 trying to scare little Damian. But little Damian says, you silly lechuzas, you can't scare me. Not even a little bit. So Damian is not afraid of La Llorona, and he is not afraid of the witch owls. So next, Damian hears the sound of little voices whispering under his bed going, he says, who's whispering under my bed? And he looks under his bed, and what does he see? He sees 1, 2, 3 little duendes trying to make scary noises under his bed to scare him. And Damian says, are you 3 little duendes trying to scare me? One of the duendes looks up at him and says, is it working? And Damian says, not even a little bit. So now Damian is not afraid of Llorona. He is not afraid of lechuzas. He is not afraid of duendes. But next, Damian hears someone knocking at his bedroom door. Knock, knock, knock. He thinks it's the donkey lady because she's going, hee, ha, hee-haw, on the other side of the door. Damian goes and peeks through the keyhole, and what does he see? He sees the donkey lady trying to scare him. And Damian says, you silly donkey lady, you can't scare me with your silly donkey ears. Not even a little bit. So now Damian is not afraid of La Llorona. He is not afraid of no lechuzas. He is not afraid of no duendes. And even the donkey lady cannot scare him, not even a little bit. Next, Damian hears the sound of someone jumping on top of his bed. He turns around and he sees 1, 2, 3 little diablitos wearing lucha libre masks jumping on top of his bed, trying to scare him. And he says, are you 3 little diablitos trying to scare me, you little devils? And they say, yes, is it working? And the man says, no, and pulls the bed sheet, knocking them all down. So now Damian is not afraid, not even a little bit, of La Llorona, or La Lechuza, or the duendes, or the donkey lady, or little luchadores jumping up, and little diablitos jumping on top of his bed. And next he hears the sound of feet running across his rooftop. He runs over to his window and sees that chupacabras leap off the roof and land on the tree right next to his bedroom window. And the chupacabras goes trying to scare him. But Damian says, you silly, silly chupacabras, you can't scare me. Not even a little bit. So now, Damian is not afraid of La Llorona. He is not afraid of no lechuzas. He is not afraid of duendes. He is not afraid of the donkey lady. He's not afraid of little diablitos jumping on his bed. He is not afraid of no chupacabras. But next he hears a voice, a sound coming from his bedroom window. He walks over and he's a bruja, a witch, casting spells at him, trying to scare him. But Damian says, you silly bruja, you can't scare me with your silly spells, not even a little bit. So now Damian is not afraid of La Llorona. He is not even afraid of La Lechuzas. He is afraid of no duendes. He's not afraid of the donkey lady. He's not afraid of little diablitos jumping on his bed. He's not afraid of the chupacabras, and even a witch, a bruja, cannot scare him. But then Damian hears, ooh, and a ghost appears, un fantasma, rattling its chains, trying to scare him. But Damian says, you silly ghost, you can't scare me. I ain't afraid of no ghost, not even a little bit. So now Damian is not afraid of La Llorona, not afraid of La Lechuza, not afraid of no duendes, not afraid of no donkey lady, not afraid of little diablitos jumping in his bed, not afraid of the chupacabras, not afraid of no witch, not afraid of no ghost. And then his closet door swings open. And from his closet steps out El Cucuy, holding a burlap sack, and says, I am going to steal you away, Damian, and I'm going to put you in my bag and take you, and your parents will never see you again. And Damian looks at Cucuy and says, really, Cucuy? Really? Look at the bag. Look at me. I've gotten too big to fit in your burlap sack. I'm not afraid of you, Cucuy. So now Damian is not afraid of La Llorona, not afraid of no lechuza, not afraid of no duendes, not afraid of no donkey lady, not afraid of no little devils jumping in his bed, not afraid of no chupacabras, not afraid of no witch, not afraid of no ghost, not afraid of no cucuy. But then a calavera appears, a calavera, the kind you see during Dia de los Muertos, and it's singing and dancing, trying to scare little Damian. And Damian goes, really, calavera? You think you're going to scare me with music and dancing? I love to sing and I love to dance. And Damian starts to dance too. So now Damian is not afraid of La Llorona. He is not afraid of no lechuza. He is not afraid of no duendes. He is not afraid of no donkey lady, not afraid of little devils jumping on top of his bed. He is not afraid of no chupacabras. He is not afraid of no witch. He is not afraid of any ghost, not afraid of no cucuy, not afraid of no singing and dancing calavera. And finally, he turns to look at all the cucuys and says, none of you can scare me, not even a little bit. La Llorona says, why aren't you afraid of me? Why aren't you afraid of us? Say the rest of the cucuys. And Damian says, do you really want to know why I am not afraid of you, Llorona? Yes, she says, I really truly want to know. And then he looks at the cucuys and says, do you cucuys want to know why none of you can scare me? Yes, we all really truly want to know. And Damian says, because I have a secret weapon that will make you all run away and hide. Do you want to know what it is? La Llorona yells, yes, I want to know what it is. The cucuys all yell, yes, we want to know what it is too. And then he says, because I have my luchador nightlight will make you all run away and look for a place to hide. And he takes his luchador nightlight out from under his pillow and plugs the electrical outlet, turns it on, and light fills the room. Light emanating from his powerful, mighty luchador nightlight. And all the cucuys run away looking for a place to hide, because we all know the cucuy is afraid of a nightlight, especially if it's a luchador nightlight. And Damian declares, and that's why none of you can scare me, but you're all welcome to come and try, he declares, holding his luchador nightlight proudly for all to see. And that is why La Llorona can't scare him, and neither can her monster friends, los cucuys. Tan tan. So, and that's the story of La Llorona. La Llorona can't scare me. Any questions, preguntas? We're getting closer to the end. So anybody got a pregunta, a question they would like to ask at this point? Anybody? No? Now, I guess I mean, as far as like writing and illustrating, my advice to you would be just to write as much as you can. Like I said earlier, read as much as you can, expose yourself to as many different genres. See what type of styles you might learn from and incorporate into what you do. And as far as illustrating, look at what's out there and try to draw what you see, and then kind of come up with a style that is uniquely you. As an illustrator, your goal is to get to the point where you can make a drawing, and even if you don't sign it, people will know that it's you, that it's your drawing just by the way you draw, and you'll get there. Let me see a question. What is the hardest part of getting published? That's very good question. Now, it's different for everybody, guys. Me, it took me almost 9 years to get my first book published. Other people, it happens faster. Other people, it takes longer. There's different ways to do it. You can try to get an agent. You can try to do it on your own. To me, the way it worked for me, the way I was able to get my foot into the door was basically by going out there and just sharing my work. I would go to book festivals. I would go to all these different literary events that were happening. And it just so happened, I tell people, it sounds really dramatic, but the whole thing lasted about maybe like 3 minutes. I happened to be reading in Houston at the Latino Family Book Festival, which was put together by Tony Diaz, which at the time was one of the largest Latino book festivals in Texas. And I just happened to be there reading. And it just so happened that Dr. Nicolas Canelos from Arte Público Press was there. And he heard me read, and we had a brief conversation. I tell people it was like really brief. It was just a very quick conversation, but it led to him telling me to send him my manuscript, and I did. And that led to a few other conversations. It led to eventually me getting a contract and Arte Público publishing my first book, which is Creepy Creatures and Other Cucuys. But like I said, the most important part is just go out there. I mean, the books with Cinco Punto Press, which is now Leonlo. I met Bobby and Lee Bird at a book festival, and that conversation led to the whole series of Lucha Libre books that you've all seen. You could be the best writer, you could be the best illustrator, but people need to see your work. And then remember, if you're a writer, you're a storyteller, and a storyteller by nature need to share their work. So go out there, share your stories, share it with everybody, let people hear. And you know what? Your story might inspire them. to come up with their own story, their own cuento, if you will. Any other questions from anybody? If not, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I am going to, what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to share with you guys. These are books that are not out yet, that I am working on right now. And so it's like a little bit of a preview of a couple of projects that I'm working on. One is called, well, one, I don't have it here, but one is called Vincent Ventura. That's from that's my new series, the Vincent Ventura Monster Fighter Extraordinaire series. There's 4 books in it. There's Vincent Ventura and the Mystery of the Chupacabras, Vincent Ventura and the Mystery of the Witch Owl, Vincent Ventura and the Diabolical Duendes, Vincent Ventura and the Curse of La Llorona, and Vincent Ventura and the Mystery of the Dancing Devil. And basically Vincent Ventura in the story, what he is, he's a boy, he sees monsters. For whatever reason, monsters are always moving into the house across the street from his. And, so him and his monster fighting friends are always going up against this monsters with Latin American roots in the characters. And so that one's going to be coming out in May. It'll be the 5th book in the series, Vincent Ventura and the Mystery of the Dancing Devil, which takes play on the Devil at the Dance story. Now, this is a series that I'm working on, and they're kind of like short poems, kind of verses that deal with monsters. And it's just the intro that I have for the series. It says, "Stay away from the shadows or any place that is dark, for it is in such places that monsters dwell." And this is one of the first in the story. They're like little illustrate. A lot of it is kind of inspired in a way by the Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. It says, "Beware of the donkey lady. If you're out late at night, stay away from the shadows or any place that's dark. Don't hide under bridges, for she's already there. Beware of the donkey lady. Beware, beware." And you see the character in the story kind of playing out. "For if she sees you and see you, she'll grab you and drag you down to her lair. Once there, your bones she will break. She'll snap them in two. Oh, she surely will. Late night snack for the donkey lady, that's what you'll be. So beware of the donkey lady, my child, for she is on the prowl and she is hunting for someone who looks just like you." And they're like, kind of like inspired a lot by those Alvin Schwartz books. And of course, with my own illustrations too. Yeah, black and white illustrations. "Don't dance with the handsome stranger. The loup-garou is coming for you. Children of La Llorona. Baba Goatman, catch me if you can. Like, can you hear the witch owl calling your name? Born of a witch, fathered by a demon, which is the Jersey Devil. Chupacabras, USA." And so these are they're like little short stories. They kind of have a bit of almost like a bit of a rhyme to them. The "Baba Goatman, catch me if you can. They say your face looks like a billy goat's head. Baba Goatman, catch me if you can. Don't you know that I'm too fast for your rusty old axe? There is no way I'm ever going to end up in your burlap sack. Baba Goatman, catch me if you can." Of course, it's a kid bragging that he'll never get caught by the Goatman. Of course, the illustration kind of contradicts what's actually happening in the story. So that's for that particular series that I'm working on. It's a work in progress, so I'll be honest, it'll probably be a couple of years before it's out. Now, I had mentioned that I am working on an offshoot, if you will, a spinoff from the I'm doing another Maximilian, but this is a spinoff from the Maximilian series. And in the book, it mentions that the uncle, the guardian angel, did a whole series of movies and comic books. He was a big cultural superhero. And so what I do is I take the movies and a lot of it is borrows from that genre, from the Mexican movies of El Santo, Blue Demon, Mil Máscaras, where they're always fighting monsters. And in the first book, it's called Return of the Lucha Libre Heroes. The first book being Rise of the Lucha Libre Zombies. And in the story, in the city of Luchaville, the citizens are going about their everyday life. Everything is perfect. Everything is great. But then, unbeknown to them, a meteor is hurtling down to the earth, and the meteor lands in a cemetery and cracks open, and a green goo begins to ooze out from the meteor, and it goes into the tombstones of four of luchadores from the villains, lucha libre villains, rudos that had lived in the past, had passed away a while back. These are not just any rudos; they are the most rudo of the rudos. They were the most vile villains of lucha libre, and they get resurrected as lucha libre zombies, which you see here, and they end up making their way to the city of Luchaville, wanting to eat brains, and there you see the people, the police are helpless to stop them, so they end up calling on a guardian angel, and like I said, the stories are over the top. They're very exaggerated, a lot of fun, kind of like the way the movies were, the lucha libre movies from the 50s and 60s were. It's a bit of a love to that type of time period, and of course he comes, and he says the guardian angel has done battle with resurrected Aztec mummies, vampires, and werewolves, and he's remembering these are some of the lucha libre heroes of the past that had fought alongside him. Most of them are, however, are retired or have passed on, and then he ends up coming, as he's fighting the lucha libre zombies, he comes across a whole new generation of lucha libre heroes that are young, that want to learn from him, and some of them are new entirely. Some are the children of some of his past comrades. For example, this one here, this luchador was called La Calavera, and then this is the daughter of the Calavera, which they call her Sugar Skull. And there you have the guardian angel doing battle with one of the lucha libre zombies. And then there's a whole kind of touching on the history of the different luchadores. And here you have two other luchadores that emerge, and here you have them doing battle against two of the lucha libre zombies. And then you have another hero, which is Cotlique, and then the other Hangman Sanchez, Mad Dog Martinez, and then the evil Medusa, El Torito, and there you have they're about to do battle, the Lucha Libre heroes versus the Lucha Libre zombies, and of course the heroes emerge triumphant in the end. But this is book one, unknown to them. The Lucha Libre zombies were part of a bigger plan that is being carried out by this group of villains, which are in space, and they are, they are the Lucha Libre invaders from Mars, which of course is a Playa del Santo and the invaders from Mars. And the book, in the whole book series, you have all these different villains that show up, monsters that show up, and they're in a way it's kind of paying tribute to that golden age of Mexican cinema with this whole group of heroes and villains from this golden age of Mexican cinema. Let's see. Any questions from anybody? I think we're getting close to the end. So if this is the time, if you got questions you want to ask, feel free to ask them. I think Wendy said she could also take some of the questions and address them to me.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I just have one question for you.
Sure.
How did you come to this work as a visual storyteller? Like, what was your path to get here?
Okay, well, I tell people, my master's and my bachelor's are all in art. I was, I have a BFA in art, and I have my master's is in art. But I grew up a storyteller. I grew up my whole life surrounded by storytellers. I tell people my grandfather, I never met my great grandfather, but everybody tells me everybody tells me, oh, your grandpa Margarito was a great storyteller. Your great grandfather Margarito was a great storyteller. And then, of course, my grandfather Ventura was a great storyteller. My dad was a great storyteller. My grandmother, my grandfather's wife, Braulio, she was a great storyteller. She's the one that introduced me and my cousin Bobby to the story of La Llorona. And man, we clung to every word that she said. And to this day, some of my because she would always tell us stories when she was cooking. It was a way of keeping us entertained or just out of trouble while she was cooking. And I remember, my fondest memories of her in front of that stove cooking, and us just me and my cousin Bobby just sitting in a corner just listening to her tell stories. And then what ended up happening is that when I tell people, I just growing up also, I just happened to know people that were writers. Me and me and Dr. David Bowles, we used to teach at the same junior high. And then I've known David Rice, for a long time, René Saldana, all these other people that just growing up, I knew them. And I, one day I just decided, what, I'm gonna write them down. And then I thought to myself, a big inspiration is Carmen Lomas Garza, because I tell people I love when she did her book series, and even her paintings. I tell her her paintings are stories. They're stories, and they're like little. And in the books, I love that you have like this little vignettes, little just short verses that, or little stories that tell you what the painting was about. And that's kind of like the beauty of what she did, because she would basically take something like Posadas and take that and tell you what they were about. And so that when you saw it, it was not it wasn't alien. It wasn't something that you didn't understand. You knew what was going on, and that's kind of like what I wanted to do. I said I'm a storyteller. The one that told me that actually was the late Gary D. Keller. He told me, he goes, "Are you an artist or are you a writer?" And I said, "Well, I'm a little bit of both." And he said, "No, no, I'll tell you what you are. What you are is a storyteller." He said, "The stories that you write, the drawings, the paintings that you make, all of it, its main goal is to tell a story. And that is what you are, above everything else, you're a storyteller." Then I thought about it, and it's true. I mean, uh, my drawings, the stories, everything, even just the performance of telling stories when I do it, in front of people, that's what I'm doing. And my goal, my hope, I tell people, they ask me, what is the best part of writing a story? And I tell them the best part of writing a story, yeah, the book signings are cool and all that stuff, and it's really cool. You get to take pictures with people. But the best part is that you're basically creating something that will ultimately outlive you. I mean, in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the writer, he or she could be gone. But that book is still going to be in a shelf somewhere. And somebody's going to come across from it. Some kid maybe will get it and they'll read your story and they'll say, you know what? I like this story. You know what? I can write this story too. And hopefully your story will inspire them to write their own story. And that's kind of like the whole idea of it, just being able to pass it on. And I know James asked if I ever met Rolando Hinojosa Smith. He was the perfect gentleman. Rolando Hinojosa Smith was such an amazing writer. I met him some years back. I met him in McAllen at a book festival, and he was just like nothing but positive energy. There are some people that you meet that when you meet them, there's nothing but positive energy that comes from him. Another one that I met was Joe Hayes. I mean, there are people that, there's a love in what they do. There's stories that they write, stories that they tell. There's a genuine love in it. So, and it just comes across when you meet them. Yeah, I love Rolando Hinojosa. His work was truly, well, my wife taught him. Oh, wow, that is so cool. Very cool. Yeah, so yeah, he was a really, yeah, he was, his books are amazing. His stories were amazing. And, but yeah, I'm familiar with him. I've been fortunate. I've met a lot of the newer, I guess the next generation of writers like David Rice and, Yola Canales and other people, Oscar Casares, other people from Del Valle. Never had the good fortune to meet the late Americo Paredes. I wish I'd had. And Jovita Gonzalez, didn't get a chance to meet them, but yeah, Rolando, I'm very happy to say I did get to meet him. Let's see, any other questions from anybody? Preguntas?
Yeah, or does anybody have comments?
Mm-hmm.
Comments, questions? This has been so great.
Um, what else was there that I could add to it? One thing, and I guess I'll probably end it with this part, uh, especially for some of the younger people, and actually for everybody. Uh, when it comes to stories, guys, an idea for a story can come literally from anywhere. And I'll give you an example. Hold on, this question. Oh, thank you very much, James. Very, very kind. I tell people, a story can come from anywhere. And a prime example of this, I tell them is, a long time ago, before, there was a group of French soldiers passing through Canada. And those soldiers happened to come across, when the train stopped, they got out, they stretched their legs, and they found a baby bear. And everybody, all the kids go like, "Oh, baby bear!" And the bear was hungry, so they gave him honey in a baby bottle. And eventually, they ended up keeping that bear as a mascot. But of course, you can't keep a bear as a mascot for too long because they get old and they get bigger. You can't keep them anymore. They grow up. So they ended up donating him to a zoo in London. Now that little bear, there was a kid that would go to the zoo and love to see this bear, because the bear would roll forward, roll backwards, and if they gave it a jar of honey, he would hold it with his paws and his hind legs and drink the honey. And that little boy that loved to go see that bear, he grew up and he became a writer. And he wrote a book about a bear that loved honey. Now, the real bear's name was Winnie Peg. And Winnie Peg was the inspiration for Winnie the Pooh. And that writer, he had a son. And he put his son in the story, and his son's name was Christopher Robbins. He also had some stuffed animals that ended up becoming characters in the book, which is why I tell you, an idea for a story, inspiration for a story can literally come from anywhere. Okay. Let's see, what are the ways that you approach word building for the story? Okay. When it comes to, like, I guess you could say that the way I write is, I tell people the story comes first. I just write. And I don't worry too much about the technical aspect till I go to the story, till I reach the end of the story. Once I have reached the end of the story, then I go back to the beginning and start adding some of the technical aspect and building on it and adding to it and removing stuff. I tell people it's like, by the time that you're done with your book, you probably will have gone through that book at the very least, 50 to 70 times. It's a process. And as you're and sometimes the idea that you start with is not the idea that comes together at the end, because stories have their own personality. And sometimes I tell people a story will impose its will on you. Like, the story will be like, I tell it, it's like a kid. I know you have all this planned out for me, but I want to do in this direction. So yeah, so it changes. A story is ever changing. And so any other questions? Preguntas from anybody? Let me see. Okay. Let's see. Thank you. Thanks, James.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful talk. We learned so much from you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how the art process works so much like writing with editors, and just how that process unfolds over time.
Yeah, and I tell people it's a learning process, and and I know I tell people, when you're working with the editor, it can be a little frustrating sometimes, but once it's over, you go back and you go like, like, I can honestly say, working with Lee Bird from Cinco Punto Press, I mean, she made me a better writer. I mean, working at with her, I mean, we would have talks about the book and the characters, and she would find the little things that I had missed. It's my book, and I was missing, like,
Mhm.
did you know you talked about this in chapter 4, and you never really did address this again? And I was like, wait back, I go back and I look and I go like, it's true. So you go back and you tie up that loose end. And it was just this really great experience working with her, because and she's heard me say it before, and she goes like, but it's like, I mean, I'm a better writer today because of her, working with her. She really truly made me a much better writer than I could ever have been without her.